Hi, everybody. Today we have Jack Ihle. Hope I'm pronouncing that right from Xcel. So, Jack, can you give everybody a quick intro of what you do and where you're from?
Thank you, David. I am RVP of Regulatory Policy. I'm here in Denver, Colorado, and I'm responsible for many of the planning and policy cases that we bring to the Public Utilities Commission of Colorado. And those of you who follow utilities and Public Utilities Commission matters know this, but in essence, most of our strategic plans, most of our major investments, our price changes are all approved at the Regulatory Commission, the Public Utilities Commission. And so it's my job to help assemble those cases and bring them to the commission for approval.
All right. So let's say you come in Monday and sitting in your office is the leadership of the State House and Senate, Governor Polis, the three PUC commissioners, and they say, Jack, you've been doing an absolutely great job. So you get to have one piece of policy and we will ram it through the legislature, sign it, and the PUC will be on board with it. What's
So
that
it's
one
one
change?
policy then? I get one policy wish then?
Yeah.
I would say flexibility generally, and then more specifically at this point, and I'm sure we'll get into this, we're all, and some of your questions lead to this, but everyone's thinking about what is the next resource that we can use for baseload or dispatchable generation that doesn't emit carbon. But my short-term wish right now is for the policymakers to really understand the resource adequacy position we're in, meaning the reliability constraints, supply and demand balance, and the need for our approval of resources we have today. By that, I specifically mean thermal combustion turbines that can ensure our reliability, balance the system with renewable energy that we're using, and replace some of the capacity that the coal-fired units are leaving as they leave the system.
All right, so in a perfect world, 20 years from now, what would we have for our baseload energy?
Well, it's not clear to me that we'll have baseload energy necessarily. I think that is a really interesting philosophical question you pose about that. I strongly think that we will, and we do have strong amounts of variable or cycling energy. Today we're at about 35% wind. Under our plans, we expect that to be about 60 to 65% by 2031. Solar is growing similarly. It's about 9% right now, and it should get to close to 30% by 2030. So we'll have a lot of variable generation, and the question is then what do you match that with? We've already moved strongly into the world of adding batteries into the system. We already have them on our system now. We expect to add more of those. They can't do everything in their current technology form, so they're about 4-hour batteries. We expect to need longer term batteries. So really, I think we're monitoring several technologies and several options that would provide that 20 to 25-year look that would support our 2050 vision of 100% clean energy. And those would include nuclear, yes, they include geothermal. We're interested in some of the technology advancement we've seen on geothermal. There's long duration energy storage, which is something that we are demonstrating or beginning a project to demonstrate at our Comanche Power site in Pueblo. You have options to potentially have cleaner fuels that can be compatible with combustion turbines. And then I think the customers will play a larger role in all this. And by that I mean customer sited batteries can play a role in this, flexible load management technologies and programs with customers, virtual power plants could bring customers into the mix in a different way. And there may be a strong role for things like vehicle to grid over that time frame. We don't know the right answers yet. We want to continue to monitor, and in some cases, we play a direct hand in developing some of these additional technology options.
All right, so one last question for what you just said, and it's because I've been reading on it. Geothermal is actually looking more and more like it can actually be commercially available in a couple of years. Are you seeing the same thing, or should we still be a little like small modular reactors? It'll be lovely when we have them. I wouldn't bet the farm on when we get them. But geothermal, do you think that could be coming in a couple of years?
Possibly. We're really interested in that, and we're working with some of the developers that have the newer technologies. At a high level, it's a matter of tapping the slightly less hot resources that are available in Colorado. Certain places have had very hot geothermal resources. So California and Nevada have had these for many years. California, at least since the 80s. The newer technologies may be able to leverage some of the technology that has been used to obtain natural gas, fracturing technologies, different underground technologies and advancements. That there's just been a lot of learning in that area. And geothermal is starting to use those technologies. So We are a little bit bullish. And one thing that I like about Colorado's resource plan process is we try to set up a very fair process where the rules of the road are known at the beginning. We're in that process now. It's called phase one. We take that to the Public Utilities Commission. They approve the terms under which we issue a request for proposals. They approve model contracts. But then phase two is the request for proposal process. And we've had very robust responses to those requests for proposals. But all that gets to the point of, I really hope, David, that we get some great geothermal bids in that phase two process, which will begin. We should see bids coming in early 2026. And we are having some talks with companies ourselves, because the company can bid projects in, independent power providers can bid projects in. And it'll be great to see what the RFP brings us on that. But in any case, I agree with you that there are some interesting developments, and we're getting a bit more bullish about geothermal in Colorado.
All right, so the next question for you, Meredith Angwin wrote a great book, and she said there's the electrical grid and then there's the policy grid. And she says at times the policy grid seems to have more power than the actual electrical grid. I went in and tried to at least start looking at the regulations you guys have. Let me ask you the first question about those regulations. Do you think there is a human being anywhere who truly understands the full load of regulations you're under?
I do my best. I might be the human whose job it's supposed to be to do all that. There is a lot. I mean, Colorado has been, to our credit, I think Colorado has tried to lead on energy policy, and we've had a lot of good things that we've worked with positively. This goes back to renewable energy standards at the state. That goes back 20. Colorado Clean Air, Clean Jobs Act in 2010 really started to move coal plants into retirement, replace them with some gas, also move them off the system. Senate Bill 19236 put the 80% goal that we really announced first as an 80% goal by 2030. Senate Bill 19236 in 2019 created a framework to execute that. Outside of power, we had the Clean Heat Plan, Senate Bill 21264. We developed clean heat plans under that. There's been policies that have driven electric vehicles. So there's a lot of statute. There are a lot of commission rules that are really focused on implementing those statutes. And then the cases themselves, which my team and I put together, working across many departments here, bring that to the commission. It's hard, for sure. We have a lot of experts on this. There are many expert stakeholders out there. I can tell you in our resource plan, which is this one's called the Just Transition Solicitation, I believe there are about 20 different interveners. So they bring their expertise into that case as well, and they test and vet our positions. The commission evaluates against all those expert opinions and renders their decisions. So it's complicated. It's a complicated business, and it's not getting more simple. But there's a lot of reason for a lot of those
Is that
rules.
complication totally the fact that it's complex, or is part of it that they have the regulations and then others on top and others on top, and you could probably get to the same point by putting in a blank sheet of paper and just trying to lay out what it is to the best understanding of all that stuff?
I think you raise a good point. I mean, at this point in our history, we've been focusing on carbon for a long time, but are there opportunities to simplify and make that a more primary objective? Now, frankly, I don't think we need a renewable energy standard anymore. We've already surpassed it. I still have to dedicate part of my team's time to building renewable energy plans and supplying renewable energy reports, because that remains on the books and statute. So is there an opportunity to streamline statute? Yes. There is a process that will happen in the 2026 legislature called the Sunset Review that Colorado undertakes, and the Department of Regulatory Agencies leads a sunset report that will come out in October of this year, which will inform a sunset bill. It answers the first question of whether the Public Utilities Commission should be reauthorized. I'm confident the answer to that will be yes. But but the other part of the exercise is to create a discussion around what laws and rules could potentially be changed or streamlined. So, if the world out there is listening to you and I, David, I would agree there's opportunities for some pruning here. That's a great question.
Do you think speaking in that, do you think the level of regulation is appropriate? Or is it more, as you were saying, just say this is the carbon goal and we don't need 8 pages of all the details around it? Or do we need that specification?
That's that's a very broad question. Every rule has its fan, I suppose, right? So, there's always going to be advocates for that. I think there's some room for simplicity. We'd like to see carbon regulations start to think about other sectors and not just the power sector. And we've already reduced 57%. We're on our way to 80% or more by 2030. As the pressure continues to focus on the power sector, because it has offered good opportunities to reduce. We acknowledge that. We take a role in trying to lead that. But as you're starting to, as the we get to the point where the last gains are going to be a little bit more difficult. I think it makes more sense to kind of put that in the context of emissions reductions in other parts of the economy as well. But to your point, we can simplify some of this, but there are important rules there. Like we really need rules that allow us to recover our costs timely and make the investments attractive that we're asked to make. We currently have a 5-year capital plan in Colorado that's about $22 billion. So is it important for us to have rules and statute that leads to a good cost recovery environment to invest $22 billion? Yeah, it's very important to us. So, again, every rule has its fan. We have, we have a strong interest in having clear rules of the road. We could simplify some of those. We would want to continue along the pathway of having a good incentive to invest, but while also working with third-party partners, whether they're independent power plant owners or customers who have some of their own generation and storage technologies. So it's a great philosophical question.
You bring up a really good point on that, in that those regulations are protective of you guys so you don't go spend $1 billion and the PUC says, well, guess what? You don't get that money back nor any profit on it, and then your stockholders
Yeah,
come
they
shoot
do.
you.
Fairly, this is a system where we're essentially the sole source provider on electricity and gas in Colorado. So with that comes an appropriate level of oversight, and that's the role of the Public Utilities Commission, and they're there to ensure that we're not overinvesting. But we would also argue that our investors will need to have a cost recovery that's not lagged and is fair for the investment that they're putting forward. And the level of those investments is increasing as we undergo this transition, which is seeking to essentially turn over the entire generation fleet.
All right, so there's that letter you all sent to the PUC about the concerns about, the way I read it was reliability at peak moments. Can you go into a bit about, for the people watching this, what the concerns are there?
Sure. So, anyone watching this space carefully over the last couple of years would be very aware that there are many new sources of increased electricity demand, peak and sales. And that's everything from electric vehicles to building electrification. Here in Colorado, we have a robust oil and natural gas industry, and we're seeking to help them electrify their operations. And then, of course, you've got emerging new large loads such as data centers. So we've got a very robust sales growth environment that's really, it's unprecedented in my 20 to 25 year career in this business, where we're seeing sales growth we've never seen before. And that is coupled with a supply chain for equipment, skilled labor to bring the technology on, the generation resources on, that's become constrained. And if you look at the national numbers, if you look at numbers across the Western region, you'll see that there are a lot of pretty pretty cautionary messages from WEC, the Western Electricity Coordinating Council, from NERC, the National Electricity Reliability Council, which is under FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And then we wanted to represent to the commission that we're really concerned about reliability. The particular issue at hand was the approval of the third combustion turbine that we were seeking under the resource plan, giving them some clarity that we plan to bring that third CT back for consideration, because in that larger context, both locally or at the state level, across the Western region, across the national footprint, the short-term reliability needs are growing more urgent.
And what's the best way to address that?
We will need, expedited approval and a good understanding that we will need, robust resource portfolios. That includes all resources. Wind offers value, solar, batteries, and combustion turbines and thermal units. Our plans are very much weighted on a nameplate basis towards renewable energy, but we can't bring a partial portfolio forward. You need all the ingredients. So we need the supply chains, we need the approvals, and we need to be able to just move forward and get these things in the ground, especially in the face of supply chains that are constrained.
Okay, so what's your guys' view of nuclear? And I'm not talking SMRs, which will happen someday, but either the Westinghouse or the Korean or the French designs that exist now.
Well, as I said, we are, as part of that solution set, especially over the longer term towards 2040 and 2050, we continue to consider nuclear seriously. Our company in Minnesota operates 2 nuclear power plants, so we are familiar with nuclear technology. We've been operating them for decades. We've actually obtained license extensions for those power plants, so we intend to operate those for decades to come. Xcel Energy is a company that knows how to operate nuclear energy. I'm holding aside your differentiation between SMRs and what you might call larger traditional units. It will have to work within the cost constraints of Colorado. It would have to work within the competitive process of Colorado. It's got to be economically competitive. It will be a valuable tool to have larger units that can operate dispatchable or baseload type operation modes in the state with zero emissions. And nuclear is one of the strong technologies that's done that for a long time. I mean, it supplies approximately 20% of U.S. electricity needs and has for a long time. So we don't ignore that. Certainly recognize that would be, a pretty big change for Colorado to consider such a thing. But it's on the table. But it's on the table alongside geothermal, clean CT technologies of the future, customer involvement, long duration energy storage. I think we're not willing to put down any of our cards right now. We want to keep the full hand of cards at this time in Colorado to evaluate what the best mix is going forward.
Which is probably the smartest way
For
to
now,
do it.
yeah, for now. Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
At some point,
Eventually you got to pick and
commit to a
build
pathway,
something.
but right now we're kind of watching as things evolve across geothermal, nuclear, and several other areas, and actively participating in some of those.
Okay.
I think I mentioned we have a commercial demonstration of the form technology it's under construction at Comanche right now. So we're playing a part. We're not just watching, we're participating too.
All right, so you mentioned batteries earlier. That to me is the other big question in all of this. I mean, 4-hour batteries for the duck curve off of solar, yeah, makes a lot of sense. But if you have a 2 or 3 day no wind period, are you looking at batteries for that, or are you looking at gas turbines to power up to take care of things?
Right now, I would say we're looking at gas turbines. Now, with that said,
what about 10 years from now?
Even before 10 years from now, we put long duration energy storage as one of the generic technologies that we consider in this phase 1 of the Just Transition Plan, which is our resource plan. Part of phase 1 is to set up essentially a model portfolio, actually several model portfolios. And we offered a generic long duration energy storage resource to the model. We're not completely sure that it's commercially available by the time that bids will come in early 2026. But we decided to model it to see if the model would take it, to explore that pathway. And it did. It selected considerable amounts of it, in fact. It selected in our base portfolio, it's about 1,600 megawatts of long duration energy storage. Now, that's many times multiple of what's actually built or operating right now of long duration energy storage, but we're interested in it. The model, showed that under those assumptions, it could be valuable. If it's not available, then it would lead to probably a greater level of thermal CTs at the moment. So it's a great question, David, and we're right at that point in time where, maybe it's 2 years, maybe it's 1 year out, maybe it's 2 years out, maybe it's 5 years out. We don't know that yet. And that's a very interesting question for us all to monitor going forward. Competitive solicitation should give us some insight on what's available commercially or not.
One thing that's interesting is Colorado does not have any great rivers for hydro, but what we do have is an immense number of potential spots for pumped hydro. I don't know how much you'll build of that, but is that one of the things you're considering?
Well, we have one. Yeah.
Oh, I know you do. I'm sorry, I should say, are you considering building more?
For the audience, so we have Cabin Creek, which is a pumped hydro facility kind of up the hill from Georgetown, and it has about 300 and some megawatts of capacity, and it's been operating since the 60s. In fact, we just expanded it. We have evaluated those in the past. We haven't quite found the right combination to do that development. And you have to go through a pretty thorough process locally and with permitting to get one of those projects to come to fruition. Would we look at that if it was a bid brought to us in the phase 2 in 2026? I think we'd strongly look at it if it offers good economics and it might offer that value that you've been discussing or kind of questioning around, which is the long duration energy storage type value. So We're interested in it. I'm not aware that we have an active involvement in developing a bid right now, but there has been interest out there, and we know that there are developers out there that are exploring possibilities.
All right, totally different question. What's the most beautiful part of the grid?
I think it's maybe how useful it is. It's allowing this conversation to happen between my office in Louisville, where you are, and it's in every aspect of our lives. The grid is moving into other sectors and is going to offer a cleaner option. It's a clear win on electric vehicles in terms of reducing emissions and reducing a household's gasoline bill. Their electricity bill will go up a little bit, but their gasoline bill will go down a whole lot more. Some people say that this, it's a relatively small fraction of the GNP or the gross state product, but it's the first part of the gross state product. It underpins everything else that we do. And it's such a versatile energy carrier that I just think that's a really, really neat thing. So, we're hoping to continue to make that more versatile, make that work better for customers over time, and continuing to bring a cleaner version of it to people.
Good answer. I agree with you by and large, by the way, on that. Next question for you. Part of the proposal from the state is to add in a boatload of transmission lines, high capacity between us and adjoining areas. Is that going to be a good thing or a bad thing? I ask in the context of Norway's about to disconnect their grid from Germany because of what Germany does to their wholesale prices at times.
Well, yeah, interesting question. We generally think that the greater interconnection is going to be valuable, and I think our unique perspective on that is within the U.S., we are one of the highest renewable fraction utilities that's operating, certainly in the lower 48. And by that I mean we approach about 80% renewable energy on a 1 hour basis. Our annual fraction is about 40%, but on a that's an annual average, of course. On a 1 hour basis, it's about 80%. And we're not operating in a deeply liquid market here. To the west, we have high mountains. To the north and south, there's not a lot of demand to trade with. To the east is the Eastern Interconnect, so there's not a lot of robust interconnection there. So we've had to operate as an island with kind of limited straws on and off that island is the way we talk about it. We think, for us at least, there is value in our ability to export more of that wind energy and solar energy when there's a surplus of it. And commensurately, if there are other regimes where the wind generation might have a different hourly profile, because that does happen. You get different generation profiles in different regions. If you interconnect with those, we think that that's going to bring value and more stability rather than less over time.
All right. Last, and we won't know until it happens.
Well, we operate in two different RTOs in our other parts of our system. We're not operating that here. It hasn't been stood up. But we think there's value there in trading energy.
Yeah. Oh, I'm not disagreeing with you. It's just, it's one of those things till you don't know until the day you actually turn those things on and you see how it plays out. Yeah, there's a reason
we haven't had that yet, too, right? I mean, I think your Norway example is interesting. I don't know the on the ground there, but I know Norway has a lot of hydro. And one of the reasons we haven't had a big Western interconnected market, the Northwest has had a really copious supply of low-cost hydro. They've been, I think, understandably a little bit cautious about trading that out. It seemed like it was working well in the region, and how those regions interconnect with other regions, I think they want to be careful about that. So, we think it works for us, and we think it can be worked out to be mutually beneficial over time.
All right, let me hit you with one more question, last question, whatever. On data centers, yes, there's data centers we need to have here, so that you get fast return and stuff. But in terms about just building out square miles and square miles of data centers to do the AI training and stuff. Are those things that would be a good thing or more a pain in the ass for Colorado on the energy footprint?
Well, every customer is an opportunity, not a pain. And we are.
That's very well said.
But for those large loads in particular, they do present some pretty interesting challenges, but also some really interesting opportunities. And by that I mean when we looked at this and we worked it through into a long-term rate forecast, and in our resource plan we had a base forecast which had 2,000 megawatts of larger loads, and then a low forecast with 200 megawatts of larger loads. So it looked at the difference between those two things, and the retail sales, and this may not be intuitive, but the retail price forecast was considerably lower for the larger system. And the reason for that is if you can add new customers to the system and you can spread those revenues across some of the fixed assets that will be there anyway, you're going to have a reduction in the retail price as expressed per cents per kilowatt hour. So there's a genuine opportunity for other customers to save money as data centers may enter the system. Now, are they going to require additional investment? Yes, we're going to require additional generation and additional transmission. But what we're saying is there's an opportunity to spread those revenues across all the customers and potentially provide lower cost for customers than if the large loads hadn't been served.
Okay. Is there anything you'd like to add or say as a closing statement before I let you go?
Just thank you for paying attention. Appreciate the questions. You know, the resource challenges are real. We think there are great long-term solutions. We think in the short term, we want to continue to get access to the tools that we will need in the short term to balance those loads, and just appreciate the conversation, David.
All right, and then normally I just say thank you, but I want to add one thing that I've noticed reading in an awful lot of the stuff you guys have filed in the discussion and stuff. You all are very focused on reliability first and then keeping rates reasonable and not having an extraordinary expense. And I think that speaks very well of you as a company, because you guys could easily just say yes to every wild idea that comes down. Your capital expenses go way up, and so does your profit. And you guys are very focused on doing the best you can to deliver this stuff at a reasonable price. So speaking as a ratepayer, I appreciate
really,
that.
thank you. I really appreciate that recognition. We are always focused on reliability, and it's a fact that our bills are very competitive nationally. Our rates are below the national average. The bills in Colorado, which are a function of rates and partially the good climate here, are amongst the lowest in the nation, truly, on the electric and gas side. That's not broadly recognized, but it's factually true. So I really appreciate that, and we are honored to serve you and all the other customers.
Thank you very much. You have a wonderful day.
Have a great afternoon, David. Thank you.